Hello to all the comic fans, Marvel geeks, and all the nerds in between. Welcome to another episode of the new and improved Vigilante Vibes, where I'll give you all the Marvel discussions, theories, and news without the toxicity that's become such a big part of the fandom. I'm your host, Megan Nicole, and today I have a very special guest amongst so many other jobs she's had, such as graphic designer, a sculptor, a costume designer, a podcaster, even a circus performer. We're here to talk to Jadzia about one job in particular, and that's being an author. You may have read the DC Book of Pride, Galaxy, The Prettiest Star, or her run of Hawkgirl for DC. No matter what she writes, you can bet that it'll all be a perfect example of representation in the comic book world, and it'll tug at your heartstrings while keeping you on the edge of your seat. Please welcome to the show, Jadzia Axelrod.
Hello. Thank you for that wonderful intro.
Of course, I'm so excited you're here. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. I'm such a big fan of yours and I love
Oh,
what you
thank you.
do. I love what you stand for. I think it's so needed in the world, really.
Well, that's really nice to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm all
Why don't you
chuffed.
Oh, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I mean, you covered a lot of it in the intro. I don't know what else to say. I'm a writer. I live in Philadelphia. Um, I Most of my stuff so far has been for DC Comics. So it's neat to be on a Marvel show. This is my first Marvel show that I've been on.
I'm excited.
Um, so, yeah, I've been writing for a long time, but only recently has things kind of taken off in a way, thanks to Galaxy the Prettiest Star, and so that's been really great in these past couple years to have reached so many people and have such a wide audience for my work.
And it's stuff that's really is needed, especially this time in life, honestly. It's nice to see that representation and see how many people just appreciate it so much, and you're making such a big impact, and it's so cool. It's nice to see someone living out their dream while making a difference.
Oh, this is absolutely me living out my dream. If little 7-year-old Jadzia playing with her Super Friends toys could see me now, she would be so amazed and impressed.
Oh,
This has been, yeah, something that I've always wanted to do my entire life is to write comics and to write these kind of stories specifically too. Since I was a teenager, I used to joke with my friends who are also comic or aspiring comic creators, and we would talk about who we wanted to work for and the kind of titles we wanted to do. And I would always say that, like, oh, Marvel and DC, they would never hire me. And the unspoken element in that is because I wanted to put in a bunch of gay stuff. And at the time, that was not what the big two did. And
yeah.
times have changed, which is great. And so I can do things like Galaxy, which is, I think someone said it was the gayest book DC has ever published. And I'm proud to take that title. I hope someone tops me in that way. We'll see. Fingers crossed for someone else to take that title. And to then have those characters from Galaxy the Prettiest Star be in Hawkgirl and be in the main DCU, and to be just as casual and open about their queerness was really a nice thing. So I'm living out a lot of previous me's dreams, childhood me, teenage me. Um, Teenage me is probably upset because I might have sold out, but I don't. Yeah, I could show them the books and they would be happy.
Isn't that a teenager thing to do, though? They're never happy.
It's
I
true.
don't
It's true.
I don't think you've sold out. I think you've reached a broader audience and it's falling on ears that need to hear what you have to say because you are making differences in these people's lives. How many people
It
grew
has
up?
been, yeah, it's been surprising. I've gotten a lot of messages from people who have really seen themselves in Galaxy the Prettiest Star in a way they haven't in other um, media, comics, or anything. And it's been really heartwarming to read all those messages.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, how many people have grown up with the feelings that they've had and they never saw themselves represented, but now they do. And that's awesome. They probably thought that would never have happened.
Yeah.
That's
I
beautiful.
certainly didn't. That's why I wrote it.
Not selling out, just changing the system.
Yeah, well, it's amazing that, again, DC wanted it at all. I'm amazed that the editors who kind of shepherded it through from pitch to finished book really believed in it, and like it almost didn't happen a couple times, and that belief paid off, which I'm so grateful for. So thank you, everyone who's bought a coffee. Um, but it could have not, and so but I'm glad it did, and that has been really great. And
Oh,
I'm glad that those editors believed in the project from jump, which is wonderful.
that's amazing. So, speaking a little bit more about you being a writer, how do you develop your characters? Do you start with the story, the characters, or both simultaneously?
Oh, I'm a character based writer, so it always comes back to characters for me. So I think of the lead, make up a little person, and then I mean this is the joke I tell, which is like I make up a little person, and then I think about what they want, and then I figure out ways to keep them from having what they want. And that's there. You have a story. There you go. Um,
Oh, wow.
it's a formula, but it works.
It's really cool. I like that a lot. It sounds like how Spider-Man was made, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
it's all characters in fiction because if they got what they wanted, there'd be no story. So
true.
it's like you have to figure out what they want, and then it's like how do we deny this person what they want for the length of the story so that it's entertaining, and then they either get what they want at the end, or this is my favorite ending, they get what they want, but they realize that's not what they want anymore. Um, and uh, So right, that's where I start. Is I like who is the main character? What do they want? What is keeping them from getting what they want? And then you kind of flesh that out as far as like, all right, who are the side characters? What do they want? Who is the antagonist? What is going on there? And but it's all down to character. I can't think of a plot without a person. I
Hmm.
know there are some writers who do think about plots before they think about people, which is awesome for them. But like that's not how my brain works. I have to have people first.
That makes sense. So, what do you believe makes a compelling comic character, and how do you bring those elements to life in your work?
Well, comics are a visual medium, so you need to have a character who has a strong visual sense.
Hmm.
And with a superhero story, even more so, that visual sense needs to be there because all of superhero stories are the internal journey done outwardly. So all the struggles that we do um, inside are given form in the form of supervillains and monsters and things like that. And those um, villains are representative of like what the hero needs to overcome. And you see this very easily in Batman. So many of his
Yeah.
villains are these like dandies, these like cartoon versions of rich guys, right? They all have very nice suits.
Yeah.
Um, right, like the Joker or Two Face or the Riddler, and like that's something that Bruce Wayne is struggling with. Is like I don't want to be one of those rich people in a nice suit who just takes from other people. I want to be different, so that's why he has to fight them. Um, so again, like with superheroes, it's really you can have a lot of fun. You can have that visual aspect and that element of play and over the topness, that opera that comes from superheroes. And I always have a lot of fun with that. It was really fun making up a new villain for Hawkgirl because she doesn't really have like her own villains. She has Hawkman's villains and she has um, other characters' villains that come and Justice League villains, but she doesn't really have like her villains, her little set. So it was really important to me to give her at least one that would be like hers. And then it became with coming up with Vulpecula, wanting to have an animal person to go with Hawkgirl, so she needs another animal, and like, well, what are the animals that are predators to hawks? Turns out none of them. Hawks are alpha predators, but there are other animals that compete for resources. And so I picked a fox for that because that's another animal that competes for the food that hawks go after. And when I had that, this came with the idea of like, well, what is the if Hawkgirl is someone who is very direct and like hits people with a mace, and that's you're taken care of. You're not getting back up from if you're hit with a mace, right? Like, so it had to be someone that she couldn't defeat by just hitting with a mace. There had to be someone who was clever and had an edge on Hawkgirl, who again is very direct and very blunt. And so it was like someone who was more of a trickster spirit, and that fit with the fox theme. And so Vulpecula kind of really came together just thinking about things that Hawkgirl was not and what she was trying to fight. So throughout this series of the 6 issues of Hawkgirl that I did, Vulpecula is someone who's trying to get back to where she came from. And that is something that Hawkgirl is trying to fight within her, to not go back and to try to move forward and not have a regression of her life. Um, and so to have that very clearly represented in this person who wanted to do exactly the kind of thing that Hawkgirl was trying to deny herself was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think you did so well with Hot Girl. I'd love to see you continue with Hot Girl. I think you really
Oh,
did
me
get the
too.
I thought you really did get the character.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was the brief, which was to like, they wanted a springboard for more stories, which I was
Okay.
happy to do. And whether we'll see more stories or not is not up to me.
Mhm.
But providing that platform of like answering some unanswered questions from her history and like moving her past just being Hawkman's partner, but into being a hero in her own right, and was definitely something I was trying to do. And hopefully we'll get to build on that
I
someday.
That's what I appreciated was like I've always liked Hot Girl, but I've never seen anyone portray her as more than someone's partner. I like seeing her come into her own. Like you gave her her own villain, you gave her her own story. She is her own character. I loved the hell out of that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something I've always loved that character
Hmm.
since she was first showed up in JSA, and I was reading JSA when it came out in like early 2000s, 2001, 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. But whenever it was coming out, I was reading it, and I loved her because she was this character who like turned to these 1940s old men superheroes that everyone loved and respected, and like those guys knew what they were talking about. And
Yeah.
she looked Alan Scott right in the eye and said, "Go to bed, old man. I can handle this." And I just love that. I love that she was like this very smart mouth bad girl in a lot of ways. And um, what's happened from then is like she's been in a lot of books since then, but because she's either been Hawkman's partner or a member on the Justice League, like that sort of attitude that was so exciting in the beginning has kind of faded into the background to make her more of a team player and to tell larger stories. And so I've always loved this character. And when I got my hands on her, I was like, we need to bring her back to that sort of spark and that defiance. And but I didn't want to pretend like the past 20 years of continuity hadn't happened. So what I decided to do is like take all the subtext and make it text. So like the reason that she doesn't seem to have a life outside of being a member of the Justice League anymore is because she literally doesn't have a life outside of the Justice League. She has taken away all of the Kendra Saunders part of her and like put that aside and is just Hawkgirl all the time. And that is not something that's healthy,
Yeah.
as we see over the course of the book. So um, that story was like very much her kind of like rediscovering herself in a very real way of like, who am I when I'm not a part of this team, when I'm not someone's partner, when I'm not in a romantic relationship? Who am I when I'm alone? Um, and I was able to give her a nice little group of friends because she doesn't, she's never really had friends. Like there was a couple characters way back in the early issues of Hawkman, but uh, she's never really had a supporting cast of her own or someone who's like, this is her roommate. She's good friends with. Nothing of that. And that's because she hasn't been had her own story in that way. Um, so it was nice to give her that too, and to bring in Galaxy into the DC proper and be like, here's the best friend you could ever have. Because Galaxy's always there for her friends. So to have these two, and that was great too, because Kendra is very brusque and um, her sense of humor is very dry, which I was not expecting when I started writing, but it just was something that came out in the writing. And to have her have this dry sense of humor, this like very almost sarcasm, really seemed to fit with that character. And but she's very brusque, right? And she gets to the point, and then Galaxy is essentially a golden retriever. So it's a very different vibe between the two of them, and they don't kind of click at the beginning, but then over the course of the series they do. And we had made a decision to like not have a romantic entanglement, me and the editor at the beginning, because as you said, like she's always been
Yeah.
someone's romantic partner. And I was like, what if we told a story where she wasn't, where she just was herself? And that was great, but then we still needed an emotional connection with somebody. So it became about her and Galaxy's friendship and what that meant and how powerful that was to have someone who gets you, right? And who like
Hmm.
understands where you're coming from, but is um not afraid of that and can like go with you on the places that you're going. Like in a metaphorical way, Galaxy can follow her to where she's going. In a literal superhero way, it's because Galaxy can also fly, and so she can be up in the sky with that. So again, we have that sort of like very visual um, metaphor for what's going on inside, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. You guys really did think through all of that. I
I
really,
thought about this too much, honestly.
it paid,
this
it paid off.
this is how I write. Is like an editor once told me, it's like I write puzzle boxes, like everything fits together, and it's like I don't know another way to do it. Like it's gotta. That's how I know it's done, is if everything fits together. Um, so yeah, I thought about this a lot. I thought a lot about the character and about what she needed and how all these other characters would interact and move around.
Okay. So, speaking of Galaxy, the prettiest star, what you
Yeah,
say is the gayest thing DC has ever put out, which is the best sentence that's ever been said on this podcast before. So, thank you.
no
So,
problem.
what do you feel is often missing in mainstream portrayals of the LGBTQIA plus people in comics? Is there an aspect of the community life or history that you're passionate about bringing to light?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Um, One is queer joy, just in general. We
Hmm.
often see queer tragedy portrayed.
Hmm. Yeah.
We see a lot of like people's queerness being cause of a problem very frequently, or it's like not there to the point of invisibility. and like, oh yeah, that person's queer, and like you would know it if you looked up on the wiki, but it's not on the text.
Hmm.
Um, and so like that's those things are very, they grind my gears because it's like all we see is tragedy, or they're like these perfect um, role models, but they don't have relationships and they don't do anything gay, right? Like my litmus test for gay representation is like, do they say they're queer or do they make out with someone of the same gender? Like one of those two has to happen, and if neither happens, then it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Um, uh, the other thing that I think is really important is like a lot of these stories often are about straight and cis acceptance of these queer and trans people. Like that seems to be often the end result is like, and now the this community accepts you for who you are because you saved the day, or because
Congratulations.
we
Yeah.
finally realized what bigots we were, but you still want to come over, right? And it's always feels kind of like disingenuous. And one of the things I really liked about the ending that I did in Galaxy, and I did have to argue about this, but in the end, I think it was the right choice, is that Galaxy comes to the realization that she does not need the straight and cis community that doesn't want her, that she can be happy without them.
Hmm.
And that is like not the not the happiest ending, obviously, but it is a very happy ending for her, especially considering her arc of like beginning and living so much for everyone else. And so then to at the end of Galaxy the Prettiest Star to be like, I don't need the opinions of everyone else. I don't need their acceptance. I don't need their um I don't need their submission. I don't need anything from them. Because what I have is here in my arms, my girlfriend, and that's important. And so it's those certain things. It's like a lot of the stuff is written. I don't want to say written with straight people in mind, but I do think that some of it where it's like, let's have a feel good straight person thing where they can read it and feel good about themselves. It's like, I'm not a bigot. And that's great that that media is there, but it's also clearly written for straight people. And one of the things that I'm very proud of in Galaxy of Pretty Stars, it's written for a queer and trans reader. And I
Hmm.
love that there have been cis straight people who have gotten things out of it, who have seen the metaphor and been able to be like, yes, this is very similar to something in my life where I have not allowed this element of my personality and my being to be as bright and as full as it should be. I get it. And that's wonderful. And I love that that's happening. But also, it is mainly for the queerbos. And and they have found it. And that's wonderful to me.
That is, and I do fully understand. I mean, I'm a pretty straight person, married with two kids, um, but
I mean,
even I
I'm
can
married with
under.
one kid. So, you know.
That's true. That's true. um, well, even I can see what you're talking about. That it does. Everything really does feel like it's written with straight people in mind, and there is always a moment that at the end it's like the straight people are accepting the gay person, but it's more of a we still like you even
Right.
though you're still cool with us, but the others, there's always that.
Right.
If they don't want to say it, I don't think it's always written with straight people in mind, but I think it is written with the fact that most of their readers are straight. I think that is always
Sure.
there. So I
And
could
that's the
see that.
larger audience. So yeah, it makes sense to pander to that.
Of course.
Um, and I don't know. It's funny because like Hawkgirl is straight,
Mhm.
and so it was ostensibly a book about a straight protagonist, but a lot a lot of queer people loved it. Um, Part because Galaxy was there and her queerness was like um, not hidden and was And that had to be right because like the point of Galaxy being a counterpoint to Hawkgirl is that this is the life that Hawkgirl has denied herself. She's become a really great superhero, but not a really realized person. Whereas Galaxy has a personal life. She has a girlfriend. She has a life that's not superheroing. Not that great about being a superhero. So they have to contrast each other and to have like this ideal, this romantic ideal of this is the relationships you should have, and it's between like um, a a fat disabled woman and a trans woman, and they are incredibly happy. And like that's not normally what you see when you think of ideal relationships.
Hmm.
And that was great. I'm just tooting my own horn at this point. I forget what I was going to say. Yeah, I don't even remember what we were talking about. I was just talking about how cool I am, I guess.
I mean, very, very well deserved. You should be doing that.
We're
But
talking about straight people.
yeah. We're talking about Hawkeye and Galaxy's personality being loud
Yeah,
because of who she is.
right, right. Oh, and like it's not a queer story, but it is a story about finding yourself, right? Because she's also in her early 20s, and that's what you do.
Hmm.
Um, so it is. Yeah, so a lot of queer people were really into that journey because that is a very queer journey to do that, even though it is not a queer story in that way. Um, and so it was fun. I realized what I remembered. I remember what I was trying to say. It was fun to write a queer story that was appealing to straight people, and then ostensibly a straight story that was appealing to queer people. It's been nice to kind of get both those audiences in these stories.
I feel like getting both of those perspectives tells you you're on the right track when the people you are speaking to can feel it, and the people you aren't speaking to can find something relatable in it.
Yeah, I mean that's my hope. Like I hope. I mean, it's like I think F. Scott Fitzgerald said this, but um, I may be misremembering. But he said something like, "This is a book about me. If I did it, told you right, you'll think it's a book about you."
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's the goal, right? With all reading, is all writing, is we're trying to tell these stories that are very deep and meaningful to us. Because if they weren't, we wouldn't tell them. But the hope is that in telling them, there is something universal. There's something about the human condition that is relatable beyond, you know me, so then you like this story. Um, that's the goal. And then again, it comes back to those characters. And it's like, what is they want? What is something human and relatable that they are trying to get at? And even superheroes who are supposed to be this paragon of everything that's right and good, you can still find that. That's another reason I liked writing Hawkgirl, because she's not a paragon of everything that's supposed to be right and good. Like, she's killed people before, and she's done some things that maybe, upon retrospect, she's not proud of, in the service of a larger good. And to have a character who's comfortable with that about herself was a very interesting thing to write. And there's a moment in Hawkgirl that I really like where she's like, I can eat the sin of your death, talking to a monster, even. So she still acknowledges that it's wrong to kill this creature that's doing all this destruction, but she's like, I'm okay with that. I can take that in. Um, and so, yeah, that's a human thing that we've done. Like maybe we haven't killed monsters, but we have like done things that maybe we're not proud of. But it's like I understand the larger goal here. I have done this humiliating thing, or I've done this thing that I don't like, and because it's necessary, because no one else is doing it, because capitalism means that I have to have a 9 to 5 day job, like all of these things that maybe we don't like, um, but we do them anyway. And so, again, to put it on this like larger than life scale with Hawkgirl and make it about fighting monsters, um, in the hope that then people will be able to see that reflected in their own lives.
Hmm. Wow, I really love how you said all of that. So something I was curious about, what has been the most rewarding part of writing LGBTQ plus characters and stories? Is there a particular moment or story that stands out?
Um, the most rewarding part is that people read it, uh, which is like I'm trying. One of the things that is necessary for me to have this job is that I have to not think about the audience,
Okay.
um, how they will react and what they will think of the piece is not should not be reflected in the piece itself, right? So when I get the book, the little compy in my hand, we're done. That was a success. The book was made. Anything that happens after that, I have no control over and I am not responsible for, right?
Hmm.
So mentally, I have to separate myself from the audience in that way. Because if I start thinking about, like, what is the audience going to think about this story, then we go off the rails. I was just talking to a writer friend of mine today, and we were talking about a book that she's writing, and she's like, "But I don't know if this like is this is too obvious. If people are going to see from the beginning that this character is actually plotting against everyone," and I'm like, "If they see it, they see it. You know, you have to you write this story that makes sense of the characters that you've created." And you can't worry about if you're going to be pulling the rug out from under them at the end, because if you just put it on this other character, it's not going to make any sense other than it's a surprise.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, so I can't think about the audience. What has happened with Galaxy the Prettiest Star is that it's been a hit, it's been embraced by people, and then they tell me how much it means to them, which again is not something that I was thinking about when writing it. So that's been amazing. Um, Especially because like this is the biggest audience I've ever had with being part of DC Comics, which is part of Warner Brothers. So it's like has a broad swath in a way that the smaller presses that I've been a part of have never had. Um, so it's mind boggling. And then to get these messages, like a woman was sent me a message about her daughter who is trans and going through school, and like things are fine in school but they're not great, and so
Hmm.
she carries a copy of Galaxy the Prettiest Star in her backpack as this like talisman to remind her to be strong and brave, and that as like this sort of psychic armor to get through the day. And it just like that broke my heart,
Yeah.
um in a really good way, like a lot of tears over emails and
I'm
direct
sure.
messages of people who just, you know, this book meant so much to them, in a way I was not expecting and couldn't think about while I was writing. And so that's been marvelous. It's been marvelous to meet people who have read the book, who have enjoyed it, who've been touched by it. Um, but at the same time, like I'm not doing it for that because I can't do it for that, because that happened with Galaxy, which has been wonderful. And it also happened with Hawkgirl, which is great because a lot of people came to me and talked about how great it was to see a character with depression represented, and
Hmm.
like to see that there in a very realistic way. And they're like, I am also a high functioning depressive. I recognize this behavior. And it really meant a lot to see that she was still a superhero who kicked ass, even though she had this very difficult um, mental illness. And like, that was something that I really wanted to put in there. So like that's happened and that's been wonderful, but I can't count on that.
Yeah.
Like it might not happen with the next book, right? And like I hope it does, but I can't expect it. So, and in not expecting it, it makes it even more wonderful. And like again, it's like a Christmas morning opening the present and not knowing what's there. Um, so yeah, the thing that's been great that I think about has been holding the book in my hands, which has been amazing. And then beyond that, it's everyone's response to those books, which has been just great.
That's so nice and so beautiful that that girl found so much comfort in your book. And that's just the one person you know about. Imagine all the people that aren't messaging you that find so much comfort in what you're doing?
Yeah. I imagine they're out there, and I'm glad that they enjoy it. Like, it's a big hit. A lot of people have bought it, and I have not heard from that many people. So, like, I'm sure there's some people who, yeah, it really touches and like carries it with them, and that's wonderful.
Yeah. So, as we are getting close to wrapping up, what advice would you give to other LGBTQ plus individuals who want to get into writing comics or might feel that they don't have a place in the industry?
Right. You have to demand your place in the industry, I would
Mm.
say. That's my advice right there. Um, when I pitched Galaxy, it was absolutely against everything they asked me to do. Um, and the original thing when I was brought in, when my agent brought me in to talk to the editors, because the DCYA line was just starting and they wanted people who were familiar with these characters but had kind of an off kilter take on them. And so I was brought in to meet with the editors, and they were like, "Do you have any ideas just off the top of your head?" And I was like, "Well, I think it'd be a lot of fun to do like a Montoya story when she was a teenager." And the editors, it was a video call. They both looked at me and was like, "We would like to do this with characters people know. So think about that." It's like, right, okay. I did not realize Renee Montoya was that obscure, but I see what you mean. Um, so I did like, this is a Superman pitch, and had a Lex Luthor pitch in there. Um, and I tried really hard to think of a Batgirl take of some kind, and I just couldn't. Um, that was not where my head was at the time. But then at the bottom, I was like, they told me characters people know. They said no original characters. It's like, okay, that's fine. But I put Galaxy down there anyway, just in case, because would have kicked myself if I didn't. Right, like it
Hmm.
would have been something that was like, oh, I should have at that point done that. And that was the one they liked, and it got to be, even though they said specifically, don't do this. They loved it and wanted to do it, and so it happened. So I think can't you can't do any self censoring is probably the best advice, right? Like I think a lot of the times as queer people, when we're trying to um, do things in this industry, we are like, well, I don't want to be too gay, right? I don't want
Yeah.
to be too much. I don't want to. Um, I will play by the rules, and then after I've played by the rules, they will let me do what I want. Is kind of a mentality I see a lot. And I don't know if that was ever a true thing that made sense, but it's definitely not a true thing now because there's no guarantee that if you play by the rules that you will then be allowed to do your own thing afterwards, right? Like so many people get like one shot.
Hmm.
Um, a friend of mine, an amazing writer, does beautiful books. She got to do like one short in an anthology at DC, and for whatever reason, she was never asked to do anything else again. And like, I don't know why, because she's brilliant. The story was great. Um, she doesn't know why either. But like, you get your one shot, right? And like, if that's the only shot you have, then you need to make it good. Um, and so like, that's a lot of why Galaxy is the way it is, with its being like, it doesn't have any punches pulled. Um, as far as this character and her queerness. And you can make an argument that I pulled a few punches with the trans stuff as far as making it focusing on the alien nature and not literally the trans nature, but I think it's in there. Um, so yeah, you gotta do that. You gotta be who you are because that's what makes your stories work. And you can't pull any punches, and you can't think that if I just behave, then later they'll let me do what I want, because they may not. Um,
All right. I think that's
yeah.
great advice. I think people do go
Also,
into
finish things. You got to finish things. That seems to be the hardest thing for a lot of people, and it's so important. You got to have a you got to finish your stories so that people can read them and know that you can finish things, because that's what editors love, is people who finish things.
I would not make it in the comic industry. I finished nothing. No, no way.
It's hard. It's
It
hard.
is. Especially since we're all ADD. It's to some level nowadays. So it's
Yeah.
like, what do you do? So I guess one last question for you. Do you have
Yeah.
any projects that we should be keeping an eye out for coming up?
I mean, yes, but I can't talk about them because they haven't been
Oh.
announced yet. So there is
Oh.
stuff coming,
So keep
but
an eye out for
like,
announcements.
yes, please.
Yeah, okay.
Um, 2026 is definitely a graphic novel's coming out,
Ooh,
provided the world doesn't end between now and then.
of course.
And right, always a caveat you got to put out there. And there might be more stuff. Like I'm, I'm in conversations with editors about some things, in various levels of close to almost greenlit kind of things.
Ooh.
So yeah, so there might be more. There is definitely one book coming for sure that I cannot say. But if you liked Hawkgirl and you like Galaxy, the Prettiest Star, you're gonna love this. It's very much in the vein of those two books, um, and I think people will dig it. It's a lot of characters that I haven't been able to use, but I've always wanted to. So I'm very excited.
I'm very excited. So, speaking of these announcements, where can our listeners follow you so they do not miss anything?
I mean, you don't have to follow me.
Yes, you guys do. You guys do.
Oh, yeah. Blue Sky, I'm on there. planetx.bluesky.social. But if you search for Jadzia Axelrod, you'll just find me just as easily. Instagram, Planet X. I'm not on Twitter anymore, so don't look for me there.
Yeah.
Don't. I barely post on Facebook, so don't even bother. That's just for like my high school and college friends who aren't on anywhere else.
True. Or
Really.
family. Like the older
Yeah,
family. Yeah.
exactly. So don't worry about that. No comic book info that you really need will be on Facebook. But Instagram and Blue Sky is probably the best place. Website is jadziaaxelrod.com, which I need to update because it doesn't have more recent things that I've done on there. Um, but yeah, those are the places.
Perfect. So if you're wherever you're listening to this episode, wherever you're watching this episode, look in the show notes right under, and you will see the links to all the places you can find Jedzia. Thank you so much for being here with me. It was such a
Oh,
pleasure. Feel free to stop
thank
at
you for
any
having
time.
me.
Of course,
This was a delight.
it was so much fun, and I got to learn so much from you. And I hope whoever is listening to this finds comfort in what you're saying and says, finally, someone's saying the things that we've been wanting to hear.
Oh, I hope so. That'd be great.
It
I
would.
hope I'm saying the things you want to hear.
So that does it for another episode of Vigilante Vibes, the only non toxic Marvel podcast. Hope you all enjoyed. Be sure to follow me on all social media sites. Just search for Vigilante Vibes Podcast. You can also check me out on nerdinitiative.com, where we review the latest comics, movies, and TV shows. And we get to interview the creators, obviously. Wherever you're listening to me now, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for listening, and thank you for all your support. Have a marvelous day.